In the shadows of Cold War Russia, children learned one rule above all others. If you see a Black Volga car, slow down near you, run. Don't look back. Don't ask questions. Just run, because those who got inside were never seen again. Today, I'm taking you into one of the most terrifying urban legends to ever haunt an entire nation. Picture this. It's 1970-something, a cold autumn evening in Moscow. The streetlights flicker on as parents call their children home for dinner. But one mother waits by her window, watching the empty street with growing panic. Her daughter should have been home an hour ago. The girl never makes it home. 3 days later, police find her school bag abandoned near a bus stop. No witnesses, no evidence, no body, just gone. But the neighborhood whispers tell a different story. Someone saw something that evening. A sleek, Black Volga sedan, chrome gleaming, windows tinted dark as midnight. It had slowed down near the girl, and then she simply disappeared. This wasn't an isolated incident. For decades, across the Soviet Union, the Black Volga became synonymous with terror, mystery, and death. I'm about to reveal the true story behind the legend, the psychology of why millions believed it, and the shocking theories about what was really happening behind those tinted windows. Stay with me. You're not going to believe where this goes. The Black Volga legend isn't just a spooky story parents told to keep kids from talking to strangers. It was a mass phenomenon that gripped the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries for over 3 decades, from the 1960s through the 1990s. We're talking about millions of people across multiple countries, all sharing eerily similar stories about mysterious black luxury cars that hunted children. Now, before we dive deep, let me set something straight. This isn't just about a creepy car. The Black Volga legend is a window into something much bigger. The fears of an entire society living under secrecy, surveillance, and control. It's about what happens when people don't trust their own government. When the official story never matches reality. When anyone could disappear at any moment, and no one would dare ask why. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the chilling origin of the legend and how it spread like wildfire across the Soviet Union. The real-life disappearances that fueled the terror. The jaw-dropping theories about who was actually driving these cars, from KGB agents to something far more sinister. And finally, the truth behind the legend, which, honestly, might be even more disturbing than the myth itself. But here's the thing. To understand the Black Volga, you first need to understand the car itself, and why it became the perfect vessel for a nation's deepest fears. Let's start there. The GAZ-21 Volga rolled off Soviet assembly lines in 1956, and it was immediately different. In a country where most citizens waited years, sometimes decades, to get their hands on a tiny, unreliable Lada or Moskvich, the Volga was something else entirely. It was big. It was powerful. It was luxurious by Soviet standards, with chrome detailing, smooth curves, and an engine that actually worked. The Volga wasn't a car for regular people. It was a car for the elite, government officials, KGB officers, Communist Party members, the people who controlled your life. Now, imagine you're a Soviet citizen in the 1960s. You live in a cramped communal apartment, share a bathroom with 3 other families, and wait in line for hours to buy bread. Then you see one of these Volgas glide past, black paint gleaming, curtains drawn across the back windows, license plates that indicate special government status. You don't know who's inside. You don't want to know, because in the Soviet Union, attention from powerful people was never a good thing. The Volga became a symbol, not of aspiration, but of fear. It represented the invisible hand of the state, the secret police who came in the night, the surveillance apparatus that could be watching you at any moment. And then, children started disappearing. The exact origins of the Black Volga legend are murky, which, honestly, makes it even more terrifying. But most researchers trace the first stories to the mid-1960s in major Soviet cities: Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev. The pattern was always the same. A child walking home from school. A Black Volga pulls up slowly beside them. Sometimes the window rolls down. Sometimes a well-dressed man asks for directions. Sometimes he offers candy, or offers to drive the child home. Sometimes he simply opens the door, and then the child vanishes. No ransom notes, no botheus, no investigations that go anywhere. Just empty seats at dinner tables and parents who age 10 years overnight. Now, here's what made this legend so powerful. It wasn't just folklore passed around by scared children. Adults believed it too. Parents warned their kids with genuine terror in their voices. Teachers discussed it in hushed tones. Even police officers, when pressed, would acknowledge that something strange was happening, even if they couldn't or wouldn't say what. The stories began to accumulate details that made them even more disturbing. Some versions claimed the Black Volga was driven by vampires, not the supernatural kind, but wealthy foreigners or party elite who needed children's blood for medical experiments or youth treatments. Remember, this is decades before we understood blood types and transfusion science was common knowledge. The idea that powerful people would harvest the young for their vitality? That resonated. Other versions were somehow worse. The children weren't taken for blood. They were taken for organ harvesting. Their organs sold on black markets to wealthy patients in the West. This theory gained particular traction because, think about it, in a society where healthcare was supposedly free and equal, everyone knew that party officials got better treatment, better hospitals, better doctors, and if they needed a transplant, well, where would those organs come from? And then there was the most disturbing theory of all. Some whispered that the children were taken for satanic rituals. That high-ranking Soviet officials, for all their atheistic propaganda, were secretly devil worshippers who needed innocent victims for their ceremonies. Now, you might be thinking, come on, that's obviously ridiculous. But here's the thing you need to understand about the Soviet Union. It was a society built on secrets and lies. The government told you one thing, but everyone knew the truth was different. Entire cities were removed from maps. Disasters were covered up. People disappeared into gulags and were erased from photographs, as if they'd never existed. So when children started vanishing and authorities offered no explanations, people filled in the blanks with the only logic that made sense. The powerful were preying on the powerless. The system was protecting its own. And the Black Volga? It was their hunting vehicle. By the 1970s, the Black Volga legend had spread beyond Russia. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, Belarus. Every Soviet-aligned country developed its own version, with local variations but the same core story. In Poland, they called it Czarna Wolga. Children were warned that the car bore license plates starting with 666. The drivers wore black suits and dark sunglasses, even at night. Some versions added that the car had no license plates at all, or plates that changed appearance depending on who looked at them. In Mongolia, the legend took on an even darker, supernatural tone. The Black Volga was said to be driven by demons or evil spirits who took human form. Looking directly at the car would curse you. Some stories claim that if the car passed you 3 times, you would die. But here's what's fascinating. Despite the geographic spread and cultural variations, certain details remained remarkably consistent. The car was always black, always a Volga, always slow-moving, predatory. The windows were always tinted or curtained. The occupants were always men, well-dressed, official-looking, but somehow wrong, inhuman. And the victims were always children or young people. This consistency is what made the legend so believable. We're talking about an era before internet, before easy international communication. Yet somehow, kids in Warsaw and Moscow and Prague were all terrified of the exact same thing. Sociologists and folklorists have studied this phenomenon extensively. The Black Volga legend represents something called a contemporary legend, or urban legend. A story that emerges from real social anxieties and spreads through networks of belief and fear. But here's the critical question, and this is where things get really interesting. What if the legend wasn't entirely legend? What if something real was happening? Let's talk about the theories. Because once the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and archives began opening up, researchers started digging into the Black Volga phenomenon with a new question. Not whether the legend was true, but what truth might have inspired it. Theory 1. KGB operations. The most grounded theory is that people were actually witnessing KGB surveillance operations. The GAZ-21 and later GAZ-24 Volgas were standard KGB vehicles. Black paint, tinted windows, special license plates, these were real things. During the height of Soviet paranoia, the KGB conducted countless operations involving watching dissidents, monitoring foreigners, and even recruiting informants. Sometimes this involved following people. Sometimes it involved picking people up for questioning. And yes, sometimes these vehicles would have been seen slowly cruising neighborhoods, observing, documenting, creating that atmosphere of surveillance and fear. Children, being more imaginative and more vulnerable to fear, might have transformed these ordinary, if oppressive, operations into something more sinister. One real KGB car watching a building becomes every black car hunting for victims. But here's the problem with this theory. It doesn't explain the disappearances. Theory 2. Human trafficking. This theory is darker, but disturbingly more plausible. Even in the supposedly crime-free Soviet Union, human trafficking existed. It was hidden, covered up, denied, but it happened. Children went missing. Some were runaways. Some were abandoned. And some were taken. Criminal organizations did exist behind the Iron Curtain. They operated in the shadows, protected by corruption at various levels of government. Could some of these groups have used official-looking vehicles to abduct children, to traffic them for forced labor, sexual exploitation, or even illegal adoption? The answer is yes. Post-Soviet investigations revealed extensive criminal networks that had operated for decades under the cover of official secrecy. Some of these networks absolutely used government vehicles, either stolen or borrowed through corrupt officials. This theory explains the pattern. Well-dressed men in official cars wouldn't raise suspicion. Neighbors wouldn't question it. And if a child disappeared, well, the authorities wouldn't investigate too hard if one of their own vehicles was involved. Theory 3. Medical experiments and organ harvesting. Now we're entering controversial territory, but bear with me, because there's actually some historical basis for this fear. The Soviet medical establishment did conduct experiments that would be considered deeply unethical by today's standards. There are documented cases of psychiatric patients being used for drug trials without consent. Prisoners in gulags being subjected to experimental treatments. The lines between medical care and state control were blurry at best. Could children have been taken for medical purposes? Could organs have been harvested? There's no definitive proof, but we do know that the Soviet elite had access to special hospitals and treatments unavailable to ordinary citizens. We know that the black market for medical goods existed. And we know that after the Soviet collapse, Eastern Europe became a documented hub for organ trafficking. Did this start earlier than we thought? Were some of the Black Volga disappearances connected to this dark trade? It's possible, but hard to prove with the evidence available. Theory 4. Collective psychosis and moral panic. The most academic theories suggest that the Black Volga legend was primarily a case of mass hysteria, a collective response to living in a repressive, secretive society where real threats were constant but undefined. In this interpretation, the Black Volga served as a symbol, a concrete manifestation of abstract fears. The fear of surveillance, the fear of powerlessness, the fear that your children could be taken by forces you couldn't resist or even understand. The legend gave shape to the shapeless anxiety of Soviet life. It provided a narrative that made sense of the senseless. And once the story took hold, confirmation bias did the rest. Every missing child, every sighting of a black car, every moment of unease became evidence supporting the legend. But here's the thing about this theory. Even if the legend was primarily psychological, that doesn't mean nothing real was happening. Mass panics often have seeds of truth. Something sparked this fear. Something kept it alive for 30 years. Let me share some of the documented accounts that kept this legend alive. These aren't just campfire stories. These are testimonies collected by researchers from actual witnesses. Moscow, 1975. A woman named Elena Volkova reported that her 10-year-old son came home terrified one afternoon. A black Volga had followed him for several blocks, as he walked home from school. Every time he turned, the car turned. When he ran, it sped up. He only escaped by ducking into a crowded store and waiting until the car drove away. Elena reported this to the police. They took her statement and told her they'd investigate. She never heard back, but her son's experience became neighborhood legend. Parents started walking their children to and from school in groups. Warsaw, 1978. Polish newspapers actually addressed the Black Volga panic in a rare front-page article, trying to debunk the legend. The article claimed that no disappearances had occurred, that it was all hysteria based on Cold War propaganda designed to make people fear their own government. But within weeks, readers sent in letters, dozens of them, describing their own encounters or reporting missing children. The newspaper never followed up. The silence said more than words could. Kiev, 1982. A teenage girl named Svetlana claimed that a Black Volga pulled up beside her while she waited for a bus. A man in a dark suit asked if she wanted a ride home. Something about him felt wrong. She described his eyes as empty and his smile as not reaching the right parts of his face. She refused and backed away. The car sat there for a long moment, engine idling, before slowly pulling away. Svetlana said she felt like prey that had just escaped a predator. She never took that route home again. What makes these accounts compelling? The consistency of detail, the official silence, the way these stories circulated underground, passed from person to person, because official channels wouldn't acknowledge them. And here's something chilling. Researchers who've studied the Black Volga phenomenon note that reported sightings dropped dramatically in the 1990s after the Soviet Union collapsed. Yes, the economic chaos created new fears. Yes, urban legends evolved. But the specific terror of the Black Volga faded. Why? Because the system that created it, the surveillance state, the culture of secrets, the deep distrust between citizens and power, that system was at least partially dismantled. The Black Volga legend wasn't just about a car. It was about a society. Let's talk about why this legend worked so effectively. Why it terrified an entire generation. Because understanding the psychology behind the Black Volga reveals something profound about fear itself. First, the legend exploited parental anxiety, one of the most powerful emotions humans can experience. Every parent's nightmare is losing their child. The Black Volga gave that shapeless fear a concrete form, something you could warn your children about, something you could tell them to watch for. It gave parents an illusion of control in a society where they had almost none. Second, the legend targeted children's vulnerability. Kids are already afraid of strangers. They already know they're smaller, weaker, less able to protect themselves. The Black Volga validated those fears while adding a supernatural, unstoppable quality. You couldn't fight it. You couldn't negotiate with it. You could only run and hope. Third, and this is crucial, the legend exploited the gap between official narrative and lived experience. The Soviet government claimed to have eliminated crime. They claimed children were safe. They claimed the state protected everyone equally. But people knew this wasn't true. They saw the disappearances. They experienced the surveillance. They understood that powerful people operated by different rules. The Black Volga legend was a way of speaking truth in a society where truth was dangerous. You couldn't openly say the government is corrupt and officials hurt people. You could get arrested for that. But you could tell your children to avoid Black Volgas. You could spread warnings disguised as folklore. The legend became a form of resistance. A way of saying, we know what you won't admit. We see what you try to hide. And finally, the legend persisted because it was unfalsifiable. You can't prove a negative. The government could say this doesn't happen, but they couldn't prove it. And every time a child went missing, for whatever reason, it became evidence for the legend. This is the power of urban legends. They thrive in the gaps between official story and lived reality. They grow in the spaces where truth is suppressed. They persist because they speak to deeper truths than mere facts can capture. The Black Volga legend officially ended with the Soviet Union, but its legacy continues in fascinating ways. In modern Russia and Eastern Europe, the Black Volga has become a cultural touchstone. It appears in films, novels, video games, and art. There's a certain nostalgia for it now. The way people sometimes romanticize the fears of their childhood once they're safely in the past. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find something more interesting. The archetype hasn't disappeared. It's evolved. In contemporary Russia, new urban legends speak of black Mercedes or BMWs, expensive foreign cars associated with oligarchs and organized crime, preying on young women. The vehicle changes, but the symbolism remains: a predatory elite using their mobility and power to harm the vulnerable. In Western countries, we have our own versions. White vans supposedly used for kidnapping. Black SUVs with tinted windows allegedly driven by government agents. These modern legends serve the same function. They give form to fears about hidden dangers, systemic corruption, and the predatory nature of unchecked power. The Black Volga also influences how we think about stranger danger more broadly. The specificity of the legend, not just any stranger, but strangers with markers of authority and wealth, reflects a sophisticated understanding that danger often comes dressed in respectability. Sociologists note that urban legends like the Black Volga often emerge in societies undergoing rapid change or experiencing social strain. They're barometers of collective anxiety. And look around today. We're seeing an explosion of new urban legends, conspiracy theories, and viral fears. What does that tell you about our current moment? Maybe we're not so different from those Soviet citizens watching black cars cruise their neighborhoods. We're living through our own era of institutional distrust, hidden truths, and the sense that powerful forces operate beyond public accountability. The Black Volga legend reminds us, when official channels fail to address real fears, people create their own narratives. And those narratives reveal what the official story tries to hide. So after all this, you're probably wondering, what really happened? Was there a Black Volga? Were children actually taken? Here's what we can say with confidence, based on post-Soviet investigations and historical research. Yes, children disappeared during this era. The numbers are disputed, but Soviet-era missing persons cases were significantly underreported. The official stance was that crime didn't exist, so crimes that did happen were often buried in bureaucracy or simply ignored. Yes, official vehicles were sometimes involved in criminal activity. Corruption in the Soviet system meant that criminals sometimes had access to government resources, including vehicles. Some documented trafficking cases did involve perpetrators posing as officials or using official-looking cars to avoid suspicion. Yes, the KGB and security services conducted operations that could be mistaken for or contribute to the legend. Surveillance, intimidation, and occasional recruitment of informants, including young people, were real activities that involved exactly the kind of vehicles described in the legend. But no, there was no organized conspiracy of vampire elites or satanic officials harvesting children. These elements were folklore layered onto real fears, supernatural explanations for all too human evil. The truth, as it often is, lies somewhere in the middle of legend and reality. The Black Volga legend was a collective response to a real phenomenon. Children were disappearing, authority figures were involved in various crimes and suspicious activities, and the system offered no transparency, no accountability, and no answers. The legend gave people a way to process these realities. It created a shared language for fear. It warned children of real dangers, while wrapping them in folklore that was safe to speak aloud. Was there one specific Black Volga driven by child predators? Almost certainly not. Were there Black Volgas, multiple vehicles, multiple perpetrators, multiple circumstances that contributed to disappearances and created the legend? Almost certainly yes. The Black Volga was real in the way that all powerful urban legends are real. It captured a fundamental truth about power, vulnerability, and the dangers that hide behind respectable facades. What do we learn from the Black Volga legend? Why does it matter today? Lesson 1. Institutional distrust doesn't emerge from nowhere. When people create elaborate legends about their own government or elite, it's a sign that something is fundamentally broken in the relationship between power and citizens. The Black Volga legend was a symptom of deep dysfunction in Soviet society. What are our current urban legends telling us? Lesson 2. Secrecy breeds mythology. When official channels refuse to provide answers, people will create their own. Transparency isn't just about good governance. It's about preventing the kind of fear that grows in darkness. Every cover-up, every official denial that contradicts lived experience feeds the legends. Lesson 3. Children's safety should never be dismissed. Even when the specific fears are exaggerated or folklore-based, they often point to real dangers. The Black Volga legend persisted because children were vulnerable, and that vulnerability wasn't being adequately addressed. The legend was the canary in the coal mine, signaling that something was wrong. Lesson 4. Urban legends reveal what a society fears most. The Black Volga wasn't about cars. It was about powerlessness. It was about the fear that those meant to protect you might prey on you instead. It was about the terror of living in a system where anyone could disappear and no one would ask why. What are we afraid of today? What legends are we creating right now? And what do they say about the world we've built? Lesson 5. The monsters are usually human. The most chilling aspect of the Black Volga legend isn't the supernatural elements. It's the realistic ones. Not vampires or demons, but well-dressed men in positions of authority. Not magic, but systemic corruption. Not fantasy, but the banal evil of bureaucracies that value secrecy over safety. The real horror is always human. The Black Volga legend represents one of the most widespread and enduring urban legends of the 20th century. It terrified millions. It shaped childhoods. It revealed uncomfortable truths about power, secrecy, and vulnerability. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see a dark car with tinted windows slow down in your neighborhood, you'll feel a little echo of what those Soviet children felt. Not because vampires or demons are real, but because the human capacity for evil, especially evil that hides behind authority and respectability, is very real indeed. The Black Volga is gone. The Soviet Union is gone. But the fears it represented, those never really disappeared. They just found new vehicles. So here's my question for you. What's the Black Volga of our time? What legend is spreading right now, warning us of dangers we can't quite name? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you think. If this video opened your eyes to a piece of history you never knew existed, hit that subscribe button. I dive deep into urban legends, hidden history, and the strange stories that reveal truth through fiction. Next week, I'm covering the legend of the elevator game and the mysterious disappearance of Elisa Lam. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, look both ways before getting into any car, no matter how official it looks. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.